coach, most of my clients and most of my friends would describe me as calm, connected to my emotions, and in control of my life. But I wasn't always that way. In fact, I spent most of my life on autopilot, numb and completely disconnected to my emotions. I knew something was wrong, but I never quite knew how to fix it. In fact, occasionally I'd lose control, and then I'd become that person who was in the restaurant screaming at a waitress because the service was less than impeccable. Or I'd be that person who was chasing a car down the M25 because they overtook me a little too quickly a few minutes earlier. There's a song called Iris by the Goo Goo Dolls, and there's a line from that song that resonated very strongly with me. It's, "I bleed just to know I'm alive." I travelled to these 78 countries seeking out extreme experiences just in an attempt to feel something. This is the cell of a Bolivian prison. This is what I saw when I bribed my way inside. But no matter if it was a Bolivian prison, or if it was an Amazonian jungle, or if it was working alongside the villagers in southern India, aside from these extreme moments of experience, I kept going back to this steady, numb state. And I knew something was wrong, but I didn't really know how to fix it. When I finally started to get in touch with my emotions by using my body as a tool, my entire life changed. I became someone who changed careers, moved out of the corporate world, and started to do something I love, coaching and helping other people. I started to get closer to people around me, living a more authentic life. I could be open and honest with them, tell them how I felt. It wasn't that I was no longer afraid of being rejected or judged, but I knew that I'd be able to handle anything that life threw at me. I started to follow my passions, taking real risks, not just these extreme experiences, but real risks, because if life didn't quite go to plan, it'd be okay. So today I'd like to share with you some of the insights that I learned on my journey and that I've picked up along the way while I've been coaching other people on their journeys. Most of us are in a situation where we're not really facing something like arranged marriage. So with the big decisions, we know that it's important to be able to follow our heart, follow our emotions, do what feels right to us. But what about the smaller decisions that we make every day? How in touch are we with how we feel, what our emotions are, and what our needs are? You know the drill. You've got dinner plans with close friends, and it's coming up this weekend. But it's been a really long week. You've been cramming for exams, or you've had long days at work, and you'd want nothing better than to sit in front of the TV and have an evening out for a change. But somehow, you find yourself at dinner. You're sat there all the while wishing that you were on the sofa at home, curled up in front of the X-Factor. What's going on in these moments? Why do we compromise so much? Now, I'm not saying we should never compromise on anything in our lives. Of course, life's full of compromise. The question is to what extent we compromise. Through working with many people like me, I've started to realize that we compromise all the time, absolutely all the time. So what if we're never actually in touch with our needs? It's so important to know what our needs are and what our emotions are to be connected, because this is the only way that we can live an authentic life and live fully and experience things fully. So why don't we follow our needs? Well, the two main reasons that I've come to see. The first one is that we live such busy lives. We're on multiple devices, we're always moving from one activity to the next. There's no time to stop, just for a moment, to breathe and ask ourselves how we feel and what we need. The second reason is that sometimes fulfilling our needs brings up difficult emotions that are quite hard for us to tackle. So let me take you back to that dinner that you found yourself at. Maybe you did know that you wanted to cancel. So why didn't you? Or what kind of friend would you be if you cancelled on your friends last minute? Maybe you were afraid of being rejected, maybe afraid of being judged, or even afraid of missing out. Whatever that feeling was that you were trying to avoid, in doing so you ended up compromising on your need. Now that may be a relatively small issue, but if this happens cumulatively over time, it happens to have quite serious effects on our life. We end up increasingly disconnected from ourselves, living inauthentic lives, saying yes when we really mean no, working long days and long weeks in jobs that we don't want to be doing, hanging out with kind of people that we don't want to be hanging out with. And when life does throw difficult situations at us, truly difficult situations, we've spent so long disconnected from ourselves that we've got no idea how to deal with those situations, and things spiral out of control. It's not working. We'll go on without the slides for a moment. So how can we start to notice if we are following our own emotions or not? Well, working with other people, I've noticed 3 things. The first one is that we use the word should a lot. I should work in this particular career. I shouldn't do this. I should call my family. I should. Instead of stopping for a moment and just asking ourselves why we should do these things and what we actually need and what we want to do, we railroad over our emotions and we spend all our time doing what everyone else wants us to do. Now, I know this very firmly from my own experience. I went out of a graduate degree into investment banking. This was the view from the 27th floor of the Barclays Tower where I ended up. I didn't go into investment banking because it was what I wanted to do or where my passion lay. I went in because I thought I should have a high salary, I should work for a brand name, and I should have a high-flying corporate career. As it turns out, it was completely the wrong decision for me. The second signal that I've seen in my clients is that we externalize a lot. We're so focused on changing the outside world around us that we put all our happiness is dependent on those other things changing. If only my girlfriend behaved a little bit differently, if only my boss treated me differently. I had one particular client who came to me, and sometimes it's subtle the way in which we seek to control the outside world. She came to me and said to me, "My husband makes me feel guilty." The thing is, your husband can't make you feel anything. He might trigger an emotion in you, but the moment where you own your own emotion is the moment where you take back control over your life. He triggers that emotion in you. Ask yourself what that need is and how you can fulfill your own need, rather than waiting on trying to change his behavior. As anyone out there who's married will know, it's quite difficult to change your spouse's behavior. The third situation that I've seen is that we have this compulsive need to be busy. We jump from one activity to the next, and I've seen many clients who continually on the go, no time to stop. It's almost as if they pause for just one moment, some really difficult emotions would come up and they wouldn't know what to do with them. Or they'd face questions in their mind, something about their lives, something about themselves, questions that are too difficult to answer. So we go compulsively from one activity to the next, looking for the next hit. So it's so important to be able to pick up on these signals, pause, reconnect with ourselves, and seek to fulfill our lives. So what do we do when we catch ourselves with these signals? Well, I spent 5 years following therapists around the world, going to endless meditation retreats and reading countless self-help books. And at the end of all of this, I learned that the answer is actually simpler than I thought it was. It's quite simple to conceptualize, a little more difficult to implement. I found that the answer was to tune in to what the physical sensations in my body were. Now, the mind is quite tricky. You know the situation where your mind's convinced you of something, you need to go and take that job, and then moments later it's convinced you of the exact opposite. And you're left wondering what you should actually do, left trying to work out what your real need is and what will really make you happy. Well, your body's not like that. In the moment, it knows exactly how it feels. So going back to that dinner, if you had paused just for a moment to tune in to what the sensations were in your body, you might have noticed a knot in your stomach, maybe a tightness in your throat, or maybe a general exhaustion in your body. Something that said to you, right, maybe I shouldn't be here right now. And if you just take a few moments out, you can start to understand exactly what those signals are trying to tell you. And I've seen this change not only in my life, but the lives of many of my clients. One of my clients, for example, when we first started sessions, was completely numb. We'd sit in a room together and she'd be relaying stuff about her life. It's like she was telling me a story that she'd read in a magazine. There was no connection to herself. Or it was almost like she wasn't even present in the room with me. I mean, she was physically there, but she wasn't present. She gradually started to get in touch with herself. And as she did, she'd start to go for walks where she'd leave her mobile phone behind. And then she'd come back excitedly to tell me about how green the colour of the leaves were on these trees and the park that was just opposite her house. Or what it felt like to feel the water under a shower. And I remember her telling me that it was as though she took a shower for the first time in her life. When we slow things down and start to feel again, life turns into this technicolor movie in front of us, but one in which we're actually participating. Another of my clients had a situation where he was quite disconnected from his family. They had lots of demands on him and he found it very difficult to communicate with them. But he didn't want to put in place boundaries, because if he put in place boundaries, then that might distance him from the people he loved most. When he started to put in place those boundaries, he ended up feeling safer with them. And in feeling safer, he was able to communicate more authentically with them, more honestly. And for the first time in years, they managed to have a proper conversation. So just this slowing down, while it sounds very simple, and just reflecting for a moment on feeling your body just in this moment while you're sat here listening to me. Although it might sound simple, it can have profound effects on your life. So I invite you today to consider the moments over the next week when you use the word should, when you externalize and you focus on changing the outside world, and when you find yourself compulsively busy jumping from one activity to the next. Stop for a moment, go for a walk, grab a cup of tea, pause and ask yourself what your need is and how you can fulfill those needs. Thank you.